the CBS Broadcast Center in Los Angeles.
Just between us. Were you there?
No. You missed out on that one.
It'll be spring soon.
I'm grinding.
We gotta get to London.
Why? Why?
I think it's gonna be the best one ever.
We'll be there.
As we wait for the spring split to start and we have the recent winter LAN event in our rearview mirror, I want to highlight 11 incredible teams that I think have a shot at maybe making the next major that we have. So the first team that I want to start with is a little unorthodox. That's Team Liquid. Team Liquid have been sitting like grapes aging to be turned into wine, but they're finally all 15. That means they are old enough to compete in the RLCS, which is great for the scene and for fans like us. Now, we did catch a snippet of this team in the third regional event from the winter split. The rules were adjusted slightly to allow Liquid to participate in the closed qualifiers, but to the surprise of many, they were shut down, going 0-3 on the day and missing the main event. Now, this certainly shines a spotlight on how deep the European region is, and it's a testament to how deep the talent runs, but also I think this result should give fans pause if they had plans of immediately putting this dynamic young trio atop the standings. These players have all cut their teeth in the ones playlist, and that's a Tau, Oski, and a Chronic, and they each possess some otherworldly mechanical abilities, but this team's offense can be hard to come by in spots and seems to disappear completely sometimes. On defense, each of these players has the ability to make impossible saves look routine, but they trip over themselves on the goal line, and they'll need to continue buffing out their comms on both ends to move from being a good team to being a great team who's on the short list competing for majors. Although I don't think I've seen enough of this team to say anything definitively, this team could really pick up steam quickly. I mean, this is something that we just saw with, look at Team Queso from the winter regional. This team was basically non-existent as a top tier team, and now they took the entire region by storm. So do I think that Team Liquid has the ability to do the same thing? Oh, certainly. Do I think that they will do the same thing? I don't think so, and that is not because Team Liquid isn't good enough. I just think that the talent pool is too deep in Europe to get one of those 5 spots in your first split together. And there's still plenty of other hungry teams out there who are still waiting to make a major. I mean, look at Karmine Corp, for example. Coming into this season, I think I was naive to think this team was an obvious contender for several majors and almost certainly worlds for that matter. I admit it, that was certainly overshooting, but I think a lot of us overshot in similar ways. I mean, be honest, what did you think when you saw Astral and Itachi on the same team? I certainly thought Astral alone could carry a team to competitiveness, and Itachi is always a player I thought was slept on. When you add up that offensive firepower alongside an improving stake, I was feeling pretty great about this team. When they finished first in the We Play Invitational in the preseason, I was even more headstrong about believing in this team. Just think about what more playing time could bring them. Well, so far over 2 splits, it's brought them no majors and, even more surprisingly, no regional wins. This team still continues to be a threat in any series. They take big wins off of tough teams. They swept BDS in the playoffs of Regional 3, but they've fallen short against teams that they should certainly beat. With Europe being just so impossibly deep with talent, volatility isn't a trait teams can afford to have. If you aren't going to be consistent, you won't get to majors. It's that simple. I like what this team looks like on paper, and I love how this team can sometimes look offensively, but I'm blown away by the fact that this team is second lowest in shots and saves per game this split. And that's been filtering by all teams in North America and Europe who have played over 50 games. I believe in this team. I just don't know if they're too deep in their heads for this roster to work. I know there's rumblings that this team might try and make an adjustment, and if so, that might breathe new life into this roster and have them still compete. It wasn't that long ago that we all thought Astro was one of the best players in the world, and I don't really see why that should change. But again, the real name of the game here is consistency, and Karmine is going to have to show that if they want to get to the spring split. Now, on the other side of the pond in North America, the hurdles to get to a major spot seem different to overcome. That's because North America is fairly top heavy, right? We have 5, 6, 7 teams that are all right there vying for spots. then there's kind of a more substantial gap when you compare that to Europe. Now, one of the few teams who do have a chance to vie for one of the major spots is Oxygen. Oxygen retooled and stood on the precipice of qualifying for the Winter LAN, and they're looking to take that next step in the spring split too. Now, the first place to start here is with LJ, who I think used last split to put himself into the conversation for top 10 in North America. And with the addition of decorated and accomplished scorer gimmick coming into the fold, LJ has been unlocked, similar to how giving a young scorer some veteran savvy and playmaking can change their career. I know it's not a direct parallel, but something that comes to my mind is look at how Chris Paul has unlocked Devin Booker as a scorer for the Phoenix Suns. With Toasty as a competent and energized third man to round out this roster, Oxygen made massive leaps from the fall to winter splits. They jumped from 13th to 6th in one split. Oxygen narrowly missed out on the Winter LAN, and a regional event or two where they made a deeper run certainly could have changed that. As Oxygen looks to build their cohesion, they should be able to match up better against the top teams in the region. Oxygen only beat a single major team in the winter split, and that was a victory over version 1. A win against one of the other 4 teams that competed in the Los Angeles LAN will certainly be a step in the right direction. But Oxygen's going to have to work fast. There are some hungry teams that are looking to come and supplant one of the teams we had from Los Angeles in the same way. One of these young and hungry teams is Rogue. Rogue has been trying to fill the first killer-sized gap that they had left, and they're trying to do that with newcomer Aqua. Still yet to see if Aqua will be able to live up to these exceptionally large shoes, but he started out pretty well. Flanked by Taroko and Gyro, Aqua's debut split yielded him the 5th highest rating in North America. This sensational rookie has been the primary reason that Rogue was able to leap from 11th in the fall split, where they posted consistent but lackluster results, to 7th in winter. Alongside this improvement, Rogue also collected one of North America's rarest accomplishments in earning a win over NRG. This team has shown flashes of tantalizing offense, especially when Aqua finds the ball with space, and Gyro is still showing he can contribute as a veteran offensive running mate. Rogue may not score a lot of goals, but when they do, they can post some real highlights. With Taroko being the last holdover from a Season X team that placed 2nd in North America, Rogue has the firepower to continue to challenge top teams, but in order to do that, they're really going to need to figure some stuff out defensively. Time and time again, I felt myself getting deflated when watching Rogue. They score these dazzling goals on the offensive end, but then they let easy goals come in on defense. Some of this is due to what I think is a lack of firm communication. Some of it is also due to just Rogue's aggressive play style being pushed up so far. It's similar to what I talked about in the video I did about FaZe, where their rotation is so tight and so aggressive that sometimes long shots just go past them and there's nothing you can do about that. And with that being a comparison between these two squads, let's actually take a moment to look at the matchup that these two had in the winter split. When playing FaZe in the playoffs of Regional 2, FaZe peppered Rogue with an astounding 55 shots in 4 games. Now, again, this is FaZe's style. They want to turn these games into, track meets basically, but Rogue letting in 18 goals is just untenable at the highest levels. With that said, this team is still dangerous in any game or series with Aqua. In a deep playoff situation, I worry about whether or not this roster can compete with the best in the world, but I certainly don't think qualifying for the spring major is out of the question. And again, it is a blessing that the RLCS is as deep as it is right now in North America, and also in Europe. We have these teams who have these transcendent young talents and they're building rosters around them. Let's talk about Guild. Guild has had a pretty tumultuous go of things this season. After cementing themselves as a solid team in Season X, Guild has been readjusting their roster substantially. In moving out Tho and Bluey, moving out Coach Gregan to be replaced by the legendary Marky Duda, Guild seemed like it had finally found a roster that worked well for them. The primary addition that has seemed to really put Guild back on the map is CRR. We haven't had a large sample size to see if this team's stellar performance was just a flash in the pan, or if Guild collecting impressive wins over Queso and Semper were stepping stones they can build on. Now, we have CRR, we have Devo, who is one of the most legendary names that we've had in the scene, but it seems like at this point, according to Shift, they are moving on from Nolly and possibly bringing in Mark by 8, which is a crazy sentence. It's just wild to say. Now, with the current Guild roster that we had in last split, I didn't think that this was a team that could be competing for the spring major, but was a team that we should watch moving forward. But now with Mark by 8 joining, again, a hypothetical. It hasn't been confirmed yet by anybody. But if that is what happens, I'm going to have to recalibrate and kind of just look things over. But even with that adjustment, I don't think that this team would make the next major. I think they'd have a lot of stuff to work out. I mean, CRR is still new to that roster in himself. So with adding another new player, I think they'll need a little bit of time. But I wouldn't be shocked if Guild was really competing for one of those spots. But these teams have some already established teams that are in hot pursuit of the same major spots they're looking for. SMPR already made a major event this year, and they're looking to get back to their former glory in this next split. Now, to caveat this, we are in the trade window. It seems like some weird stuff is happening, so we're probably not going to have this exact same roster, but I'm going to move forward as if we are. I wanted to talk about this team, and until things change, this is what we're rolling with. I made a video about this team, and more specifically about their frontman Archie a few months back, and I highlighted how among a sea of gifted and standout players in the world, Archie sits in pretty rarefied air amongst a select few at the top. His ability to maintain strong and disrupting pressure and sustain momentum allow him unique ability to stay relevant in plays on both ends of the field. Archie's knack for beating opponents to the ball is almost like a Tim Duncan bank shot or a Dirk Nowitzki fadeaway. You know he's going to try it again and again. You know it's coming. You just can't stop it. With Rocket League still in its relative infancy, the scene is flush with legends and veterans who help shape the sport. But I feel like Archie's teammate Shawset45 is one of few players to offer a distinct and palpable change to the scene. Formerly considered one of the best players in the world, Shawset etched what is probably his most notable performance at DreamHack Valencia in 2019. In this event, Shawset was over and above most of the competition for PSG, and his performance ushered in widespread utility of the Fennec. Now at a different point in his career, Shawset seems less applicable as a main offensive threat, but still stands as a defensive wall. This allows Archie and SMPR's secret ingredient to success, Casio, to impose their will on the ball. Certainly, SMPR not repeating in the winter major was frustrating, but it's not really indicative of their strength. And looking over the entire results from the split, they performed well in every group stage, and they don't have any standout losses that are too bad. While some teams have long-term aspirations to compete, SMPR is certainly in the thick of things, and whether they stay together or not, I think they have a legitimate shot to return to international contention during the spring split. That certainly would change if the person they are moving out is Archie, but we will wait and see what happens. One team that doesn't look like they are making any changes and are still trying to make it back to former glory like SMPR is Complexity. By now, I'm sure everybody knows the backstory of the former darlings of the South American region who recurringly stomped on that region so hard that they decided to move to North America. Formerly true neutral, Complexity consists of Razebull, Shad, and AJG, and in their first LAN representing the North American region, they only lost 2 games. Both of these were to the eventual champions BDS. This result, finishing top 8 at the fall LAN, brought validity to the moves that they made. Would their level of play translate to the big leagues in North America? Yes. Would they be a viable contender at the world stage, even though they placed 5th in their region? Also yes. Coming into this regional split, I think everyone expected big things and continued growth from this roster, but much like SMPR showed us, making back-to-back majors is really hard. In a general sense, Complexity still looked as though they were playing to their typically high level over the course of this split, but as we learned, the group stage can be unforgiving. In Regional 2, Complexity was 0-3'd in a group with Space Station, Shopify, and Charlotte Phoenix, and that's really all she wrote. Complexity's style is a rarity in today's game, often opting for stellar defense and low-scoring affairs where they're just trying to counterattack teams. While averaging a similar amount of saves and shots over the 2 splits, Complexity often invites opponents to shoot on them so that they can generate these counterattack chances. I think the stat that crystallizes why Complexity had poor results in the winter regionals was their shooting percentage. They shot a North American low 20%. Now, this number is fine for most teams, but it makes it exceedingly difficult to win games when you very rarely score. For reference, during the winter split, out of 54 games played, Complexity only scored 3 or more goals on 12 occasions. So when you rely so heavily on low scoring affairs to win, Shooting the lowest percentage in the region is a practical death sentence. We've seen complexity style work in several regions, and this team has built a cohesive style that play well together, but they're going to need to improve on creating more high quality chances and or shooting a higher percentage if they want to repeat as major contenders. Joining complexity on that climb back to major contention is another North American team, Envy. They had a 0-3 regional one, and they basically were just flat from then on out. There was basically no way they were going to make the major, but they did improve on their results as the regionals went on. This fall from grace is attached to a litany of factors, but the most pressing is the roster change that they made to part ways with Atomic and pick up Drees. This exchange between G2 and Envy came after both teams had poor performances at the fall LAN, but so far the talent swap has seemed exceedingly lopsided. I mean, G2 just won the Los Angeles LAN, and Envy cratered from 4th in the region to 9th. This team still have two truly notable talents on their roster. I mean, Mist is widely considered as one of the most solid two-way players in the region, and Turbo is a 4-time world champion. Now, as I was saying, Envy did improve on their results as the events went on this split, but they certainly didn't look as strong as they did in the fall split. In the fall, they had wins over teams like NRG, Space Station, FaZe, G2, practically every top team in the region, and in the winter split, their top win was over Rogue. This team can still work, but it's time to start putting each of these players under the microscope. They're all at different points in their careers, but we should expect more from each of them. Starting with Mist, everybody knows how much talent Mist has. He's one of the best players in the world when he's on. But if you're one of the best players in the world, I think that you should strive to lifting your team above your results to be a better team. Turbo Pulsa. Sizz was talking about how Turbo still has the ability to be one of the top players in the world. He just needs to revamp his mechanics and catch up to the current meta. That's something that he needs to focus on. Drees has always been a player where the conversation around him seems to be he's young, he's developing, just give him time and he will get there eventually. But at a certain point, you're kind of a finished product, right? Especially when we find ourselves at a time in the RLCS where being young is no longer an excuse. Look at the entire Queso roster, look at what we're anticipating from Liquid, look at Daniel, Aqua. Being young is no longer an excuse to not be one of the best players in the world. If this roster wants to make it back to major contention, all three of these players are going to need to improve their own results and also work more cohesively as a team. I also wanted to highlight a couple of teams from our emerging regions, and the first one I wanted to start with was Ground Zero. Over the season to this point, they've competed in 4 regional final matches and still hold a commanding 2nd place in the point rankings. When talking about this region, Amphis is usually one of the first players that we discuss. His crisp aerial dribbles, his flip resets, his double touches. He's a player that often gets overlooked just because he's from an emerging region, in my opinion. Oceania is typically known for their speed and their unrelenting offense. This is something that we see from teams like Renegades and Pioneers, who just represented the region. Ground Zero really doesn't pace itself in the same way. Perhaps that's a stylistic approach they'll look to adjust, but as with a lot of teams on our list today, the group stage format is super unforgiving. Ground Zero and their fans will definitely circle the underwhelming top 8 finish they had in the first regional event. They dropped to a Pioneers roster that ultimately ended up stealing their spot in majors. Ground Zero is still in the mix for spring and certainly Worlds as well, but as the region continues to gather talent, they're going to need to make a renewed push to find themselves back in front of a crowd. Torsas was part of the Chiefs roster that placed top 4 in the Season 6 World Championship, and Express is continually a top performer in the region. So this team has arguably as good a chance as any to make it back to LAN, so long as they can overcome the Pioneers or Renegades. Era Eternity find themselves in a similar situation that Ground Zero is in, where they're certainly one of the top teams in their region, but with only 2 spots available, they're going to have to overcome one of the 2 teams that stand in front of them. Era is one of the many exciting teams coming out of the South American region, and we just saw that their talent can no longer go underappreciated, with Furia making a deep run in LA. The Era Eternity team that made the fall LAN is changed up a little bit. They dropped Math and they picked up the 1v1 sensation KV1. The team secret that represented the region alongside Furia in the winter split actually picked up the formerly dropped Math and dominated Era over the winter split. Era went 0-5 against Furia and Team Secret over the winter split. So while this team can certainly continue to build on their cohesion and improve as a roster, it's a big hurdle that they're going to have to overcome in dismantling one of those two teams to get their spring major spot back. And finally, I wanted to talk about the ex-Sandrock Gaming, now Falcons esports team. It's a real shame that we didn't get to see them in Los Angeles. I thought when we had the full cohesive roster back, we were going to see something really special from them. I thought out of the emerging regions, they were my top pick to actually win the event if any of them were to make that deep of a run. I know a lot is circulating about this team right now, and I would prefer to not speculate about what has happened. But I do want to say, as we continue to see the esport grow and develop, seeing more talent from all of these emerging regions and having top teams compete at the world stages in a way that they really haven't traditionally before is nothing but exciting to see as fans. I wish all these players the best. I'm really excited to see that they're still staying together under a new organization. I think it's important that we take a moment to thank Civic for everything that he did to not only get this team together and get them kind of on the map, but also to bring more attention and focus to this region overall. We're almost certainly going to see them at the spring split, which is exciting to see. And I covered 11 teams in this video. I easily could have done 22 teams. The RLCS has never been deeper, which is just so exciting as a fan. Teams like Luminosity, teams like Misfits Gaming, 00 Nation, even Team Vitality. In North America, we're seeing some shuffling of the deck in the middle. Teams like Xset, teams like Shopify Rebellion, teams like eUnited, who are all making changes to try and take that next step. But yeah, at the risk of this video running way too long, I'll just cut it there for honorable mentions. Were there any teams that I missed? Were there any of those honorable mentions that you wish I would have gone more in depth on? Were there any teams that were off my list completely, or anybody I talked about that you just don't see it? You don't think they're going to have the results going into the spring split? Please let me know in the comments below. So really interested to hear y'all's opinions. Please let me know. And I guess time will tell. I'm almost positive some of this video is going to be immediately outdated by the time I finish editing it with this trade deadline. It seems like Europe is just in shambles right now. But yeah, guys, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I appreciate you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time.